murders, no, that won't do. The long-distance running murders, no. And finally Jack said, well, what did they call these things? It's an awful mouthful, the go as you please races. And I said, well, the press sometimes called them wobbles. Ah, she said, well, that's it. And so it was, and we called it Wobble to Death, which was a catchy title. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that it won the competition. So that was my start. And after that, more Victorian stories, and I was launched, as it were. And very happily, and with my £1,000. I couldn't give up the day job yet, but I did after a while.
And it was pretty unusual in those days, because we're talking about a book that was published in 1970. Historical mysteries were not the massive thing that they are today. You were a pioneer, really.
Oh, well, I suppose. I mean, there were a few others around, but I sort of stayed with it because I felt more confident. I wasn't at all happy with the idea of writing a contemporary story. I just felt like I wasn't in touch enough with modern police methods and the things that go on in the forensic labs and so on. So I felt safe with Victoria. I knew how to research it, and I'd sort of researched the running book, and so I just took various Victorian enthusiasms, let's say, and wrote about those. So that the second book was a book about boxing. So I stayed with sports, playing it safe. Called The Detective Wore Silk Drawers. And that got me into it didn't get me into trouble, it got one of my uncles into trouble, my Uncle Humphrey, who had served with the Indian Army and was a rather grand man, and went along to Brighton Library and said, my nephew has written a couple of books. He said, there's one I'd like to get. The Detective Wore Silk Drawers. And the librarian said, well, if you wait a moment, sir. And she went away and spoke to another of the librarians, a more senior lady, who came over and said to my Uncle Humphrey, what was the title of the book? He said, The Detective Wore Silk Drawers. And she said, I'm sorry, sir, but we don't stock that kind of book. And I hope we never will. So, there we are. And then these Victorian enthusiasms followed the music hall, the great thing, the great craze for boating that followed The Three Men in a Boat book. And spiritualism. I did one called A Case of Spirits, and waxworks. Waxwork was the 8th book in the series, and I was very intrigued by the great crowds that would gather at, outside the waxworks in Baker Street, Madame Tussauds, on the day after a murder, because they would. One of the perks of the hangman was that he would be given the clothes of the murderer he hanged. So he would then sell them to Madame Tussauds. They would have the effigy, the wax effigy, ready, and so as soon after the person was hanged, we had to get into the Chamber of Horrors there and see this killer, whoever it was, dressed up in his own clothes. Very macabre, but it rather intrigued me, and I thought, well, there's probably a story in this. So I started off the book from the point of view of the hangman, eyeing up the possibility of hanging a woman.
And that is a particularly fine novel. I think possibly my favourite of the Crib stories. But Crib, television came knocking, didn't it? Quite early in your career.
Yes,
Tell us about that.
Well, with that book, I was just very fortunate that it was reviewed in Time magazine, the American magazine, and one of the Granada television producers, a woman called June Wyndham Davies, happened to pick up Time magazine on a flight back from America, and saw this and thought, well, this might be interesting to do as a one-off. So they did, and they cast Alan Doby as my Sergeant Cribb, and he was lovely. He was terrific. I was really pleased with the casting. And William Simons as his sidekick Thackeray, who had a huge beard and was rather an uneducated man, as policemen tended to be at that time, and went along with Cribb on the cases. So it went out at Christmas, 1979, and was a success. So then they said, well, you've got more books, haven't you? You've written some more. So, and I'd already got 7 others there. And that was a great bit of luck that I had these books already written, and they decided then they would adapt them all. And the TV series followed, and it was very successful. It went out. It was sold to, I think, about 43 countries. It outsold Coronation Street, believe it or not, in the first year. Even Laurence Olivier Presents was about 3rd in the list of the most successful things that Granada put out in that year. So that was great.
And there was a second series.
Yes. Having done that and had good sales, they then said, well, have you got any ideas? I know you haven't got any more books, but have you got any ideas for books? And I said, yes. Well, there were 1 or 2 things that I thought vaguely I might do something on, and they wanted them remarkably quickly. They wanted scripts. They asked me if I would look at one of the earlier scripts, the one for the Detective Wore Silk Drawers. It wasn't too good, so they asked me if I would if I would work on it, and I did, and I licked that one into shape a little bit, so I had some idea about what script writing for television involved. And then they said, well, we want 6 more for a second series, and I said, well, fine. I'm sure I can do that. When you want them, and it was about 8 months away, and it was an incredibly big thing to undertake. And so I sort of came home thinking, you don't turn it down, though, do you? So I came home and said to again my ever patient and long-suffering wife, I've agreed to do 6 more TV scripts. And I don't know how we're going to get them done in that space of time. The books have taken a year each one. So she said, well, why don't we divide the work? I'll do 3, you do 3, and then you can sort of put them into Victorian language or whatever, but we can sort of up the plotting, because she read a lot of crime stories herself. I'll do the plotting for 3 of them. So she did. She did a very good one on a wedding, on a Victorian wedding, which was great fun. And meantime, I was working on one about Jumbo, the famous elephant who Barnum decided that he would buy and take to America. And there was a great protest about that. So that was the makings of a story. And that was it. That's the story, really. That's how it came about. We did our 3 each, and I think in a way they were more successful because they were written just for TV, whereas the others, the television at that time, a book had to be condensed into less than an hour because you had the commercials. It was just a 1-hour thing, so you were condensing some quite complex stories. And they were cutting lots of stuff out, and it worked better if you knew at the beginning how much you were going to do in the time.
Yes, I can see that. But then after the enormous success of Cribb, you started to spread out into other types of crime writing. Tell us a bit about some of the other books.
Yes, well, I thought it was going well. And that gave me some space and a chance, because I knew by then I had a fairly assured readership. I better try and do some other things. And I think the first thing I tried was, you may pull me up here, I can't remember exactly what the sequence of things was, but I did do one more running book which I wrote as Peter Lear.
Yeah.
And that was called Golden Girl, and I